"What an extraordinary place," cried Lucy. "All those stone animals and people too. It's like a museum." "Hush," said Susan. "Aslan's doing something." For indeed he was. Aslan had bounded up to a stone lion and had breathed on him, and then, without waiting a moment, he whisked around and breathed also on a stone dwarf, then on a stone rabbit, and then on 2 stone centaurs. But at that moment Lucy said, "Oh, Susan, look at the lion." At first, the stone lion looked just the same. Then a tiny streak of gold began to run along his white marble back, and it continued to spread. The lion shook his mane, and all the heavy stone folds rippled into living hair. He opened a great red mouth, warm and living, and gave a large yawn. Gripped by unrelenting snow and ice, the winter in Narnia seemed like it would never end. Evil flourished, while good creatures had to either hide, collaborate with evil, or risk being turned into stone. And yet, something was stirring. A single flower poking through the snow as it began to melt, the singing of birds, the lengthening of days. Beaver told the 4 children what all this meant. He said, "They say Aslan is on the move. Perhaps he has already landed." It seems as if it's been winter for as long as we can remember. The gods maybe been absent or very distant, that the world's become darker or our prayers unheard. In some ways, we become so immune to the suffering around us because there's just so much of it. Things have become normal for us. Our patience worn thin, our hearts grown hard, like those cursed statues. And yet, there's no doubt that God is on the move. There's a transfiguration taking place before our very eyes. And today's gospel of the transfiguration is meant to refocus each one of us on the meaning and end of Lent, on the meaning and end of each of our lives. For very easily, we can grow comfortable with our current condition, comfortable with our penances, comfortable with our daily trials, with our relationship with God. "Lord, it is good for us to be here. Should we build 3 tents?" Our Lord refuses, for he knows that the other mountain we must all go to and climb, the other mountain we will have to follow after him, for that is the path of every Christian. Christ shares his transfiguration with those 3 disciples. He shares it today with all of us on the 2nd Sunday of Lent in order to prepare us. Yes, to prepare us not to be scandalized at the horrors of his passion, but perhaps even more so to prepare us that we will not be afraid at the glory of his resurrection. For this seems like the more difficult task. When spring finally does come, and it will, when healing occurs, when relationships are mended, when a leader actually steps forward, and when this whole lockdown and pandemic end, we have to ask ourselves, will we be willing to actually let go of the pain and suffering and to move on? Will we be able to turn that page onto the next chapter of our life? Will we accept the glory and joy of the resurrection on Easter morning? Or do we grasp onto our pain tightly with all of our might? Have we found comfortable little hiding places in our sufferings, in the shadows? Have we grown addicted to stress, drama, gossip, or bad news, like we need our fix? Has laziness, isolation, impersonal meetings, and Netflix become normalized for us? It doesn't quite make sense, does it? Of course we would want our trials to end. Of course we'd want to go back to our normal lives, to be happy and to move on. But really, deep down inside our hearts, when that time comes, will we want to? Will we accept goodness? Will we accept the springtime when we've become so familiar and comfortable with winter? It's ours, after all. The pain, the betrayal, the loneliness, and sometimes it feels like that's all we've been left with. We've grown very accustomed to it. So how very hard it is to move on. Transformation and growth can be difficult, for spring always involves thawing, and thawing can hurt and be messy. Snow melts into mud, steam comes off the ground, all of the dirt and garbage and leaves are exposed, and it smells. The ground remains soft and messy. So perhaps it's just easier to stay in winter, to not grow, to not climb that mountain with our Lord. After all, we really don't want to come out of that little bubble of comfort that we've created. But dear friends, winter's strength is waning, and Christ is on the move. And you and I can be part of it. We can climb that mountain with him. We can stand by him throughout his passion and death. And we can choose to accept his glorious resurrection, leaving behind our anger, our resentment, our discouragement, and our fears, if we are so bold. Do not be afraid of the springtime that is to come. It's okay. It's okay to not be a victim any longer. It's okay to find yourself actually doing all right. It's okay to trust him, to find yourself transfigured by him. And so, dear friends, be brave enough to turn that page onto a new chapter when it comes. The last was very good, the characters enjoyable, and the heartache extremely real. But carry all of that with you over into the hope and excitement that lies on the next page. There remained an ancient prophecy, one that the animals in Narnia dared only to whisper in hushed tones on those long winter nights. It goes like this. Wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. At the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. When he bares his teeth, winter meets its death. And when he shakes his mane, we will have spring again.